And welcome to Two Wizards and a Mic, where two old players of D&D talk about D&D, decide what D&D should be, and they follow our rules. They just listen. Wizards just calls us up every week and says, "Hey guys, what's going on this time?" So I am Shane, and to my left,
I am Andrew.
and this week we're talking about armor, weapons, and equipment, which is one of those things that I think gets neglected quite often. You don't see it talked about a lot of the time. I think it gets kind of pushed to the side, and uh, it's assumed that your character will automatically have things because as you're putting your character together, of course, if you've chosen a particular class, you should have these items. But I don't recall ever having characters go on a shopping spree at the very beginning of an adventure. They just kind of have their stuff. But I know in our games, you actually check our character sheets to make sure we have the right stuff and if we're missing anything, which I think is actually kind of important. So, how's it going? What's your first thing that every player should know? What is the first thing that every player should know when equipment gets involved?
Well, like you say, it's overlooked, especially we're sort of in a magic item world these days, and yeah, there's a lot of really cool things you can do with what you choose for your gear. The first thing is figuring out whether there's two ways to get your equipment. One is to take the equipment that comes with your class and your background. The second is to roll for money for your character, how much money they have to start out on page 143 in the player's handbook. And then you take that money and then you go on a shopping spree, and that's what your character starts out with. So, first, you have to figure out which way you want to go as far as getting the equipment. Of course, dungeon masters and players, you can make another agreement. Maybe your player is a noble and they're extremely wealthy, and this player, for some reason, is allowed to have a bit more gold. But the whole process, I think, encourages people to be creative because you don't have a lot of money at the beginning, which is usually in gold pieces. And so you have to figure out how you're going to divide it up, especially fighter characters like warriors, fighters, paladins, rangers, because armor is expensive. Wizards, it's very straightforward. The spellcasting classes in general, you're not really going to spend a ton of money. But yeah, especially for warriors, it's very important how you spend that first initial gold.
What is your as a DM? What is your preference like when you start a campaign with a bunch of players? Um, what is kind of your gut reaction to get the players started down the path of having the right stuff, having the right equipment, having the right weapons, things of that nature?
I actually would go on the side of personal choice and creativity. So I would encourage people. I don't actually tell players what to do, but I personally I like the choice where you just roll up gold and then you just go for it. Um, then you've got really you can do whatever you want in terms of within reason of how much gold you have. Um, some newer players, and if you want to get a better idea of what your class might be useful, then yeah, you could take the starting equipment with your background and your class. But I think it's more fun personally to go to the equipment list and armor and weapons list and just figure it out yourself. It's a great way to learn the game because you learn how much things cost and you get an idea of what is the medieval sort of world economy, and you get an idea of how heavy things are because there's also rules for how much you can carry. So
It's also
yeah,
more fun, I think,
yeah.
because
And
I
in
mean,
general, as a DM, I let players, that's their character sheet, that's their character. I
yeah,
only really get involved if I think something sounds off, like if somebody's carrying too many things,
right.
or I do check it, like you say at the beginning, just to see, everything is there. Like for example, spellcasters usually need a focus for their spells, so you have to choose something for that. Um, people often forget about having containers to carry things.
Right.
They'll
It's
say,
one of the most
oh, I'm
common
carrying
things.
this and this and this and this. And I'll ask, well, in what?
Well, it's like you're carrying 50 feet of rope. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
in the real world, I kind of have a good idea of what 50 feet of rope sort of looks like.
Yeah.
And if you don't have something like a backpack or some sort of method of carrying it, that rope is just going to be like hanging around your neck or something, or like off your hip. And it's going to be just not like, I'm gonna get my sword out and attack that creature. Nope. It looks like your sword hilt got stuck in the 50 feet of rope.
Yeah.
And you can't pull it out that way. That particular round. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think playing that sort of part of the game, like when you're first starting out, saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, well, so you guys have all arrived for the adventure. You're doing this, that, and the other thing. Here's what you're supposed to do." How about going to the market? There's a place down the road, that you can go to, and you now have the gold to start off with. And I think that, to me anyway, I think that's kind of a great way of teaching people how to really think about that stuff. I mean, there's also the specter of encumbrance, which a lot of the time I find gets ignored, which I'm kind of happy about. But at the same time, it's not like you're going to have a character like, I'm a halfling and I'm carrying 700 pounds of gear. Are
Yeah.
you really? Where are you putting that gear? It's like being in Skyrim. I've got 19 swords.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Where?
Actually, it's funny you point that out because I always make sure that it's somewhat realistic. I used to play with, oh, I've got 500 gold arrows and 50 Daedric arrows and 1,000 steel arrows. And now I always make sure that it's somewhat realistic, because it's more fun, I think, if it has some connection to reality. Um, but yeah, you could include a little trip, like you say at the beginning, to a market or a store. I really want to get. I mean, especially for new players, that might be kind of a cool thing to do. People learning the game. We just actually
Yeah.
had our first family game. We went away into the mountains on the weekend, and
Nice.
so I made. I didn't. It wasn't very long the session, and basically we'd already prepared the character sheets, and yeah, I think one way is to have, like you say, a little trip, but you can also start off right away with players having everything ready. The
Well,
most
especially when you
expensive.
have. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, it's okay. You can go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, especially when you could also fall back on. I mean, the fun of going shopping is awesome, but if you have experienced players, like completely like, this is like the 13th campaign in the last three
Yeah,
years,
yeah,
you can kind of say, all right, okay, I trust you guys. You've picked your class, your background, all that kind of stuff. You're going to pick the stuff you need. And
hmm,
it's not going to be, I'm carrying, instead of 5 torches, I'm carrying 28. It's like, where are these torches going? Like, what exactly, along with that rope and the other stuff you need as that? Like,
hmm,
what? Are you strong enough to do that? I mean, that's,
yeah,
again, it's like you just collect junk, and as in the games that we've been playing recently, it's like, who has the bag of holding? Because I can't
yeah,
carry this because I am small and I might be strong, or I might have run into something that knocked my stats and hit points down a bit. Uh, that kind of stuff happens, and you have to like
hmm,
deal with that sort of thing, where it's like, well, my strength is down by 5 points or 10 points or whatever it is, and I can't carry as much stuff. So you have to kind of go to the rest of the party and say, hey, can you hold on to my armor? I don't really want to give it
hmm,
to you because I kind of need it, but at the same time, it's the most heavy thing generally anyway.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I actually do have a picture here, or a copy of the electronic version of the player's handbook.
All
Um,
right. So yeah, this is page 144, 145. And really, and the armor's there, the table, there's descriptions on the pages as well, but the table to the right, and that's the most expensive um, part of gearing up. And if
yeah,
you're,
yeah,
yeah, if you're a warrior, like a fighter, ranger, paladin, you're not going to have 1,500 gold pieces at the beginning for plate armor. You're not going to have 200 for splint. You're not going to have 750 for half plate or for breastplate. 450 or 400. So there's light, medium, and heavy armor, and then shields, and it tells you what your armor class will be if you wear that armor, and if you have a shield, you get to add 2 to your armor class. And then it tells you if you're going to be at disadvantage by wearing this armor, and that includes all the heavy armor. If you're going to be at disadvantage doing stealth checks, and then if you need to be strong, like exceptionally strong to wear this armor, which you do for all the heavy armor except for ring mail, but it's very expensive. So usually if you're a fighter type, you're starting out with, sometimes if you have a very like agile fighter, you might use leather or studded leather, but usually you're going to be chain shirt, maybe chain mail if you rolled a high amount of gold.
What is kind
And
of
then
the
if you're
average
a
amount of
rogue or a
gold a new
bard, you
player
might.
has?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking like, what is the average amount of gold that a new player might have at the very beginning?
It's around. That's actually on the pages just in front of that, page 143. So a fighter, for example, at the most could have 200 gold if they roll a perfect roll, whereas a barbarian max 80 gold.
Oh, wow.
So the highest is, yeah, the highest are bards, clerics, fighters, paladins, rangers. They can all have 200 at the most. And then the lowest are druids and barbarians, down at around 80 gold. So yeah, that's not a lot of gold. Like if you look at,
Yeah.
splint armor's 200 gold, you you wouldn't even be you wouldn't even have a weapon if you're a fighter.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you have to make these decisions as a player to be like, I would like to be defensive, but I would like to have a balance of being able to do some stabbing as well.
Yeah,
Maybe that really fancy knife is not going to really work for me. Maybe just a
yeah.
basic one with some better armor, or
Well, that's
all
why
these choices that the players have to make.
a lot of NPCs are going to end up having leather armor or studded leather. The good thing about that is you can add any dexterity modifier to it. So the medium armor, you can only add maximum two dexterity modifier to your armor class. But leather armor, like studded leather, if you have a dexterity of 20 and your modifier is 5, studded leather now gives you a 17 armor class. If you have magical studded leather, you can get up to close to 20 or more.
I
So
remember the
you'll find a
first
lot
time
of
I
characters,
had
a lot of NPCs with those.
with those kinds of things. Like I remember the first time that I had studded leather where I I don't know if in one of your games. I can't remember, but I had studded leather, and we ran into a rust monster, I think,
Mhm.
and the character got hit several times, or I got hit. I can't. Who was it? Me? But anyway, I remember it being like an issue where the studs actually melted or rusted off,
Yeah,
and so there was a discussion about, okay, well, if half of the studs are gone on your studded leather, then what does that do for your armor class?
yeah.
Things like that. Like that's actually, yeah, that's studded leather is important, but you could damage it really easily, I would think.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones to use. I think it'd be quite popular a lot of the time. Armor, I think, is pretty straightforward. And then, of course, certain classes like wizards and druids, you're not going to have much in the way of armor. Well, wizards, you're going to have none, unless
Yeah.
somebody pointed out the other day, dwarves are actually proficient in heavy armor, no matter what class they are. But as a DM, I probably wouldn't allow that. Um, Somebody would
Okay.
have to come up with a good story for me to give them a battle mage where their dwarf was in heavy armor and they were a wizard. Because to me, a wizard doesn't wear armor.
No, not at all. But overall, I think that it is. I mean, it is a challenge for all of these classes to, uh, or sorry, not classes, for the players to really kind of, like we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about backgrounds and things like that, where those choices will impact these kinds of decisions. And and I also think it's a challenge to be enjoyed, because you really kind of want to be able to play your character in a way where you know that there's going to be some weaknesses, where oh well, if I pick this thing, then that means that the armor might not do what I need it to do if I really get into the thick of things. But at the same time, but that will be okay, because I will have a party with me that hopefully is going to not let me die and become
Right.
nothing more than a pincushion.
Right. All right, let's move to weapons. So weapons, there's a huge range. We won't go through all of them. Here's some of the descriptions, and then on the next page they have the big table on the right there. So things to consider are that weapons that have the heavy properties. So on the far side, there's properties of the weapons. So weapons that have heavy can't be used by small characters like halflings and gnomes. And some weapons have reach, which means they can reach 10 feet instead of the normal 5 feet, like a lance or a trident. I think, yeah, no, not a trident. Oh, interesting, but a lance for sure. Um, some weapons are versatile, so you can use them with one or two hands. My favorites, I think, would be quarterstaff for spellcasters. If you use it with two hands, you get 1d8 damage, which is pretty decent. And of course, the great sword everybody loves because you get to roll 2d6. Or the
Yeah,
great axe,
that's
you have
my
full
favorite.
d12 to roll. And then the rapier, I like that one. It's got a little bit of style, and certain weapons you can use with an in unison with another weapon. Then there's strange ones that don't usually get mentioned, like whip. Uh, it only does 1d4 damage, which is not very much. And then
I
then
couldn't
there's
even tell you what a war pick is. What is a war pick?
a
I
war
don't.
pick. I believe is similar to a mining pick, but it's designed for combat, I believe.
Oh, interesting. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I just found a bunch of pictures of it online, and yeah, okay, I could totally see that.
And then there's
It's
things
like
like
got.
net. I don't think I've ever seen a character choose net before. It only
I
costs
know that
one
I never
gold.
have.
Only one gold. Come on.
Because what I mean, yeah, because I mean, essentially that could be as a thrown weapon. That means that in theory you could almost entangle, grapple ish some foe, and then on the next turn being able to attack it, or your party being able to, like, okay, well that character can't move for whatever amount of time, stab it a lot.
Yeah, that's true. It could be useful, although you can't throw it very far. You can only throw it 5 feet without disadvantage, and then up to 15 feet. Like if it's 10 or 15 feet, then you're at disadvantage when you throw it. So that's a thing
That
to
is actually
consider
very
too.
cool.
Range weapons, the first um, range they have, like a heavy crossbow, 100 feet is the first one. So then you don't have disadvantage. And then from 101 feet to 400 feet, you have disadvantage on that second range.
And I would actually be interested to see. You know what? My next character is going to have a net. I don't know what else I will have, but that to me, like a net and maybe a I don't know, like a spear,
Yeah,
or something like something longer, like even a quarterstaff, might be an interesting combination to be able to
yeah.
do that. I mean,
Or halberds have,
oh
yeah,
yeah,
halberds
halberds
have
will work too.
reach too. I think glaive will, yeah, glaive has reach. Another interesting thing to note is loading uh, properties. So the heavy crossbow, you actually have to load it. And same with the blowgun. So you can't, if you have two attacks, you can't actually attack both times. You can only attack once because you're going to be loading on the next attack.
That's actually very cool because we had that campaign where one of the weapons that we discovered was a self-loading or some, it was an automatic loading of some sort, like a magical crossbow,
Right.
and that was a big deal because it was such a, we're gonna have this thing and it's gonna be great, and it's gonna make the weapon or the fights that we get into better. Um, but to yeah, like a reminder of all these weapons that need to be loaded. I hadn't thought of the blowgun. Like that's actually kind of a big deal, especially when you don't have two attacks until fourth-ish level. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Fifth level maybe. Yeah.
Because would you have to? Okay, if you use the blowgun as your attack, do you reload it and then you're able to use it again, or would you have to use an action for that?
You can, if it has the loading feature, you can use it with one attack. That's fine. But if you have two attacks, you can only still use it once. Actually, once on your turn. I believe actually, if no matter how many attacks, yeah, no matter how many attacks you have, you can just use it once. So that's because the rest of the time you're loading. So there's some good thing, like the really good thing about the heavy crossbow, it does a lot of damage. The crossbow bolt is
Yeah.
1d10 damage. That's a lot. I mean, that's the same as a long sword with two hands, and almost as much as a great sword or great axe. So it's serious damage, but you can't shoot twice or two or three times or four times.
Especially when you have, I mean, especially with a range of what, 400? Yeah, 400 feet. I mean, that, right away you connect once.
Right. But
You could, at the very
only up to
beginning, you
100
could
feet without
take down
disadvantage.
somebody.
But it's only you only get
Right. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that's still good. 100 feet is still pretty solid. I like how the bow is the range is 600 is so 151 feet to 600 feet. You're at disadvantage, but still 600 feet you could potentially hit something. So I
Especially
mean
when you
most
have those kinds of numbers where most most encounters are less than 100 feet.
yeah, exactly. Most
So
tables that
there's only a few times right away.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Unless you're doing a lot of
Um,
theater of the mind stories.
200 the true
Yeah, so lots of choices.
across.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So lots of choices with weapons. And then let's move to equipment. So this is really more mundane, basic equipment, but some of it can be quite useful on page 150 of the player's handbook. I would like to mention a couple of things that aren't on there. I don't believe they're on there. One is sand and one is flour. And those are really useful if you are looking for something that's invisible. So you can even tell your dungeon
Of
master
course.
as soon as your adventure starts, I reach down, I grab some sand, I put it in a sack you'd have to buy. But right
Yeah.
there, you have if you have sand or flour, it can be extremely useful if you have something that's invisible, and it could save your
Which is something
party.
people don't think about,
Yeah,
like rarely. It's like, oh, you've been attacked and you can't see the thing.
yeah,
Okay, great. I
the,
will swing in the air randomly.
exactly. The first item they have, I don't think is super useful. The abacus, I don't think that's super. It would really change the adventure that much. Unless maybe your whole party has an intelligence of less than 10. They're sitting outside the store trying to figure out how much money they have and how much things are going to cost. Sitting there on the steps of the store with an abacus.
Okay, so if we only have copper pieces and the thing costs 5 gold,
Yeah.
um, Okay, carry the. Do we translate into silver?
Yeah. The next two things are extremely useful because you can use them as weapons, and that they are a vial of acid, which does a lot of damage. It's expensive though; it's 25 gold, and the same with alchemist fire, very expensive. And they both do damage, especially the acid, and you can throw it as a weapon. They don't weigh very much. It shows the cost and the weight for all these items. But I would highly, if you have the gold, at least a vial of acid would be quite useful. Yeah,
That's actually a really good advice because I think a lot of the time, even I notice that I'm carrying a bunch of stuff I've been carrying forever, and
right.
I've never gone into
Used it.
the the equipment list and gone, oh this, oh I had that, I could have
Yeah,
defeated the blah 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 using that thing that I totally just ignored because I was, what sword do I need? What axe am I using? What kind of
right.
flask have I got that's gonna power me up or whatever? That
Oh yeah, it can be extremely useful. So ammunition, pretty straightforward. Antitoxins can be useful, obviously, in circumstances. Maybe if you're fighting a monster, that has can poison you. Um, Arcane focus. So these are foci for spellcasters. So wizards can use a spell book as well as one of these, or you can have a crystal orb, rod, staff, or wand. Especially from the sort of Harry Potter generation, I think a lot of people find that it's
right.
pretty cool to have a wand as the focus. Which I agree. Um, then the key item, which a lot of people forget, which we mentioned earlier, is a backpack. So to put all this gear in something, uh, you're going to need, yeah, this is what you need. So it's cheap, only 2 gold. It weighs 5 pounds, which is heavy, as you can see, for most of the items, but you have to have something to carry your things in. All right. Yeah. So another one is the ball bearings, which can be very useful. Put them on the ground. You can create difficult terrain for creatures to move through. And another creative way to use it, and really all of these items, you can use your imagination. Ball bearings, you could actually jam them into a lock to make a lock unusable. The barrel, not probably a popular item unless you're building a headquarters. As you've mentioned off camera, weighs 70 pounds. So most characters, that's just not going to be part of their armory. We also have basket, which probably isn't going to be high on the list. Bedroll, though, I would always take a bedroll so you can have a comfortable rest in a dungeon or outdoors.
Bell. Why would a bell be useful?
You could use it to signal a party. Say one person is scouting ahead and you've decided, you could use hand signals, but maybe you couldn't see the person. So it could be a warning as well. Yeah, there's a lot. You could attach it to a tripwire. There's a lot of these items actually you could use as tripwires to set up as traps or around a campsite to see if there's movement. Blanket, I think, very useful. It depends how detailed your dungeon master is going to be on making sure you're keeping warm. And block and tackle. Now, this is a lot of people don't know in 2022 now. It's not a common item that's lying around everywhere. So it enables you
Yeah.
to move a lot of weight, usually pulling it up, but you could also drag it across a surface, and it's like a mechanical device.
Yeah, it gives you like leverage and stuff, and we had to look that one up too because that, you see it all the time in on television and film, but I don't think
Yes.
it's ever been talked about. Like, let's take that block and tackle. No, it's let's hit that guy with that thing that just happens to be lying there that's
Yeah.
crucial to operating a ship and stuff.
Right. Yeah, you can move like or lift up 4 times your weight with this device. Sometimes you'll see it on ships or shipbuilding yards, warehouses. Then we have Book, well, that's pretty straightforward. Although it's expensive, 25 gold pieces when you're starting out is quite a lot. Then a glass bottle, very useful, especially if you're trying to carry some kind of liquid. You could use it as like a basic kind of Molotov cocktail if you put oil in there and a
Yeah.
rag. Um, there's lots of uses for bottles. You found some kind of liquid you want to keep, and then we have bucket, probably not really high on the list. Caltrops, I love these. So these are small, spiky little things you can throw onto the ground. And again, it's difficult terrain. You can actually damage someone who passes over them. Plus, their speed is down by 10 feet for a while. So it's quite useful, especially if something's or someone is pursuing the party, or you want to set an area around a campsite or where you're resting. Um, I think they're
The medieval
underrated.
version of Lego. Lego on the
Exactly.
floor.
Exactly. It's a metal evil version of Lego. It's the metal Lego, right? It's the Spinal Tap version of Lego. Um, then candles. Now, these actually have lots of uses, obviously for light, but you could use the wax in creative ways. You could seal letters. I've even seen people make earbuds and you could stick that in your ear. So certain creatures, their attack is something you can hear, or certain spells. So you could actually, potentially stop those from happening by using candles, by wax in your ears.
That's actually very cool. That
Yeah.
is totally useful. I would never have thought of that.
You could also seal holes. Like if gas was coming into somewhere and there were only small holes, you could seal them. Um, and candles are very light, obviously. And how much do they cost? 1 copper piece. So that's a
So cheap.
hundred candles for 1 gold piece.
Nice.
Then, of
And there's
course,
no
a lot.
weight associated with them either.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's
Of
no
course, I can
official
carry
weight.
a hundred
They
candles without
weigh
any
zero.
problem.
Sorry?
I can totally just carry them around without any
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. Like we were talking about with Skyrim. What? I've got 5,000 candles. But containers are important if you're going to play realistically. So we talked about how a backpack is a
Yeah,
key item, and then also there's cases for your crossbow bolts, obviously a quiver for arrows, and then cases for maps or scrolls. And those are useful because they're usually pretty airtight, and you could take it underwater temporarily. So a good way to keep something dry, or if you're in a rainstorm. And a chain you could obviously use if you had a lock to hold something up, or to chain up a monster, or to drag something, even attack someone with a chain.
talk.
Then we have chalk, extremely useful for marking where you are in a dungeon, your path, so you don't get lost. And also could be used, again, depending on how detailed your dungeon master's game is, you could use it to keep your hands dry for climbing.
Exactly. Yeah, actually, that like climber's kit is like a couple down, and that
Yeah,
and chalk together. Yeah, that actually would be really useful.
yeah. So chest again would be more if you're setting up your lair, 25-pound weight. That's quite a bit. Climber's kit. So there's a bunch of kits and packs on the next page that contain a lot of items, and so they're quite useful. And you just read exactly what's in those. There's a description there on the following page. So that's pretty useful. Clothes, pretty straightforward. Fancy clothes if you're going to maybe impersonate someone, or trying to go to some ball that the king is throwing or something.
Mhm.
You have a component pouch. Now, you really have to have this. If you're a magic user of any kind, you have components. If they cost something, you have to buy them. But if they don't, you have to have a component pouch where the others are being stored. So you don't necessarily have to buy them according to the rules, but you should have a pouch that contains these things that these sort of mundane items that you use in your magic. So that should be included.
Especially
There's
a
a
25
crowbar.
gold piece. Like, holy cow.
Yeah,
That
yeah, component
component is
pouch.
just
Well,
expensive.
that's those magic users don't have to spend any money usually on armor, so they have lots of extra
Right,
gold
good
compared
point.
to the other characters. So usually, so component pouch, not a big deal really. But you're right, 25 gold is a lot. Crowbar obviously could be used to open chests and doors and could be used even as a weapon, improvised weapon. Then we have druidic focuses or foci. So these are like the wizard having a wand or a spell book. The druid has some other things like mistletoe, staff, actually a wand, different kind of wand. Then fishing tackle, very useful, not only for getting food, which I haven't seen that many parties do. And in medieval world, you're going to be close to water most of the time. Most of the settlements are going to be built near water because you have to have water. So it could be very useful instead of having to buy rations. But you could also use it to fish things, like if you're trying to get something out of a tight spot,
I
you could
dropped
use
my
the
keys through that thing on the floor. I can't find them. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. You could use the fishing line as another kind of tripwire as well. Then flask or tankard, um, grappling hook. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm going to throw my rope up there and then climb up." Well, unless you're going to lasso some outcropping or maybe a part of a castle wall, you need a
Right.
grappling hook. If you're planning on climbing with a rope, it's got to be tied onto something. And it weighs
Yeah,
4 pounds. So that's significant, actually.
yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, like, that would be. I mean, grappling hook plus rope plus, a lot of the other sort of things that you carry. Uh, yeah. What a pain that would be.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of hammers. You might need them for hammering in a piton, which comes up in the list later for climbing. They can be very useful. I think, yeah, a small hammer. Well, it is 3 pounds weight, but pretty
Yeah.
useful. Healer's kit. I think you would. I think every character should take this.
Yeah.
Doesn't weigh too much. Pretty cheap, and this can be used to stabilize characters, so you don't have to make a roll to. Normally, you can roll to see if you stabilize a character. The healer's kit will just do it automatically, so very useful.
Yeah, I
Then we have
recall
holy.
that in one of our sessions about 2 or 3 months ago, uh, you actually brought that up because we had a situation where like 2 or 3 players were down, and uh, one of the players said, "Oh, I'm going to use my healing kit," and you're like, "Oh my God, finally somebody has a healing kit! Like, why are you
Yeah,
guys not all taking this thing?"
yeah,
Yeah, it saved our ass like pretty much
yeah.
at that point.
It can, and for 5 gold pieces, I would have it in my arsenal for sure. Holy symbols for paladins and clerics. Holy flask or holy water. So this can be very useful if you're fighting undead or some creature um, that is vulnerable to that substance. Then you have an hourglass. Costs a lot. 25 gold is a lot when you start. Maybe
Yeah.
useful depending on what kind of campaign, especially if you're in a settlement. Maybe your adventure is all based around a city. I know people, some groups have adventures entirely in cities. They never leave. Seriously. And if you have
But at
like a
least they've
mega
bought
city,
one hunting trap.
yeah. Well, if you have a mega city, it's not really realistic in a medieval world because you need so much farmland to support the city. Like I would
Yeah.
say most cities would only be around maybe 20 or 30,000 people, but it's a fantasy world and people kind of change those. Like I know in Greyhawk, there's cities that have hundreds of thousands, I think millions of people. And yeah, hunting trap is very useful. Again, I don't find a lot of parties hunt or fish for their food, but you can, and it's can save you some money too.
That would actually be quite a powerful thing to do to a party where they don't have access to, say, rations, or they don't have access to the traditional things that they do. Like, uh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, says the innkeeper. We don't have any rations that you can carry with you
Yeah.
that won't spoil. So something like, well, you're just gonna have to live off the land, guys.
Yeah. Well, those sort of more survival campaigns are quite fun. I did that with you guys with one down in the southern part of Mir there when you started as smugglers. And yeah, I
Oh,
just
right.
really, yeah, I kept the money really low and the things you had access. So it was a barren area, not very populated. So it can be very fun doing that kind of campaign where, everything really matters, like every gold piece you spend and every time you find food.
It
So
becomes an
then we have
event.
ink and ink pen again, certain campaigns and adventures. It could be very, very useful. Jug, whatever. I don't know why that's even in here. um, ladder, maybe if you have, again, your headquarters could be useful. 25 pounds, it's a lot to carry a ladder around while you're fighting monsters. Um, yeah, we have lamps, again, obviously useful more in the headquarters. And then lanterns, quite useful, costs a bit more gold than a torch, or quite a bit more gold. A lock to, obviously you could use that with a chain to tie a creature up or to lock something up, a chest. Magnifying glass, 100 gold. It doesn't weigh anything. 100 gold. That's a lot for the starting out. That might be something you'd want later on.
It's like borderline magic. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, you just started a fire using that
yeah.
glass thing.
Manacles, I would always take those. They do weigh a bit, but they're very useful if you're going to interrogate a creature or an NPC. Mess kit, pretty straightforward. A mirror. Now, a mirror you could use, obviously, it would help if you're dealing with a Medusa, the Medusa or a basilisk creature, so you don't actually have to look at them directly. But we have one player in our regular group who often uses it just to peek around a corner. So that's something I know many
Hadn't thought of that.
players, they always take a mirror.
Bad idea.
Flask of oil, we mentioned briefly before, you can make a Molotov cocktail. You could use it as a lubricant for something to open a lock or make yourself slippery for some reason.
It's going to be a tight fit, but I'll
Yeah,
make it.
we can squeeze that halfling in there.
That's exactly what I was thinking too.
Oh, really? We can butter him up.
You might be small, but
Well,
here's some
actually,
assistance.
slippery creatures in D&D, there's some fish creatures which have a slippery feature, which makes them very hard to grapple. So you could do that as well.
So, that why is the halfling always oil himself up before a battle?
Yeah, let's just slide him down the dungeon. All right,
Go
so
to
we
the
have
oil
paper
slides.
again. That actually, paper and parchment. That's usually something I do take, and a quill and ink, just in case. Especially if you're a wizard, if you're planning on
Yeah.
writing anything down in your spell book, like copying spells from another spell book, I would ask the wizard, okay, with what? What are you copying that down with? And if they don't have ink and a quill and parchment or their book, it's not happening. So pen and paper, ink. I think most characters, especially spellcasters, should have it, especially wizards. Perfume might might not come up very much.
I don't think I've
Miners
ever
pick,
heard perfume referenced.
yeah, miners pick depends, what kind of campaign you have, obviously. Now a piton, very useful. I always thought this was pronounced piton, but it's actually piton, and these are those spikes you hammer into rocks for climbing. But you could use
Right.
these for lots of things. Try to open a chest. You could even use it as a weapon. So yeah, pretty useful, especially if you're in the mountains. An iron pot. Again, how, it depends how detailed your DM is. I think this one I wouldn't worry about too much. If I was a DM, I would just let it go that, um, yeah, if somebody said, "Oh, I have one in my backpack," I would just go, "Okay."
Sure. Yeah, cook that meal. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Potion of healing. So it does cost a lot at the beginning, early levels, 50 gold, but this is better than a healer's kit because this will get you back
Yeah.
up. Um, Potentially, if you're unconscious with the healer's kit, at least you're stabilized. Potion of healing could bring you back to consciousness. So um, probably the most valuable thing on this whole list, but very expensive. Pouch. Yeah, if you're being very detailed, you might want to know where every little thing is. Quiver,
Exactly.
we talked about containers before. You definitely need those. A portable RAM. So in certain circumstances, if you want to bash down a door, maybe you're playing the medieval version of Cops.
Exactly.
I'm
We're
not sure if
here,
you've seen it.
adventurers.
Have you seen the Star Wars version of Cops? The video?
I have troops. Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah,
Oh
good
yeah.
stuff. All right. Robes. Yeah, I would. That would be something certain characters would use. Now we have rope. Now, a bit heavy, but again, this would be a key item I would always take.
Yeah. It's always
Obviously, to
useful.
climb
That,
up,
a
climb down.
piton, and a grappling hook, and you're golden.
Yeah, yeah. And you can obviously, the characters say we tie up a creature with what? So you
Yeah.
need a rope's very useful to tie somebody up, climbing. Then we have sack. So yeah, I would say this is the kind of thing that would help you with the containers you need. So if your game is more realistic, merchant scale, maybe if your characters open a store. Otherwise, I can't really see this being a big deal. Sealing wax, you could use this, or you could use candle wax. Shovel, possibly. Signal whistle. This is pretty useful, like a bell to signal the party.
Yeah.
So it doesn't weigh anything. That's the good thing. Although 5 gold is a lot for a whistle. That's high technology in medieval times.
Five
Look what I
five
can do.
copper. 5 copper.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Oh, you're right.
It's
Five
only five
copper. My
copper, yeah.
mistake. Yes, I haven't got my new glasses yet. um, all right. Signet ring. So one of the backgrounds, the noble background, it comes with the signet ring. If you take your equipment that way, or if you buy them, you would have to buy this. So that might be useful, and maybe all your party have the same symbol on a signet ring. Maybe you're part of a faction that wears a special ring. Soap, mm, probably not in the top 10 on this list.
I can't think of a single time ever that anyone has ever done anything with soap in the game.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are situations, but wow.
yeah. Maybe again as a lubricant for some reason. Spell book. So obviously wizards have to take this. So they don't get a lot of gold. They don't have to spend a lot, but you take the spell book and the component pouch, that's 75 gold. That's most of your starting gold, right?
Yep.
Iron spikes. So similar to pitons, but more sturdy, I would say. Um, and maybe fighting vampires. Spyglass. Now, this is the most expensive thing on the list by a long way. 1,000 gold. So it's impossible for you to have this when you start out. So maybe by the time you're fifth level or fifth to 10th level, if you're on the, if you're on the seas, you're, here you have a ship, maybe this comes into play. Or you want to see something very far away, obviously. Two-person tent, so pretty heavy at 20 pounds, but very useful. I
Yeah.
If I have a stronger character, I would always take this. Where if encumbrance is not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. It would
Tinderbox,
be
every single character. I almost would say this is the most
everyone.
Yeah, I would almost say this is the most important item. If you can't start a fire, you can't do
You're
much
going
as
to
far
really
as,
just want to die immediately.
yeah. Torch again, maybe this is number two on the list. Cheap, doesn't weigh much, very useful. Just because you have dark vision doesn't mean you can see everything, at a reasonable distance. You can only see a very short distance, and you can only see in black and white. And there are a lot of people still play humans, and you don't have dark vision. So
Yeah.
torches usually come up. Vial, like an empty glass, empty bottle, could be useful. Water skin, I actually wouldn't worry about this unless you wanted to carry some sort of special kind of liquid. But I just include water with rations. I'm not going to.
Right.
I think too much, there too many details can weigh the game down, and worrying about water for the characters, I think, is a bit too much. But I can understand if someone wants to play a real detailed survival campaign, then every character needs this. And then a whetstone, uh, could be useful.
Yeah, sharpening knives, sharpening your sword, that kind of stuff. It'd be
Yeah.
useful to a certain degree.
The next page has some detailed equipment packs. So if you're going to be in a dungeon, the Dungeoneer's pack is fantastic. If
So, like
you're a
these guys,
rogue, the
where's that?
Burglar's pack, a Bard, the Explorer's
Yeah, there
pack,
we go.
the Cleric, the Priest pack. Explorer's pack for any character is useful. So these are really useful, but they cost more. And the details of what's inside them are on those pages. And then the very last page for equipment is tools on page 154 in the player's handbook. And here it shows you um, a lot of tools, some kits like disguise kit, which is useful, gaming
Yeah.
sets, herbalism kit, musical instruments, thieves tools, which every rogue should have. If they want to, they say, I want to open the door. Okay, with what? Well, you have to have bought that.
Yeah.
So we should point out that in Xanathars, there is a great section which goes through a lot of these kits and tools and gives you tons of ideas of how to use them, which I think is, a really cool thing you can add to your game.
Well, especially since when you have all of these as a player, when you have all of these things assigned to a class or you find them out in the wild, there's times where you don't necessarily get into that creative mode where it's like, well, I have this thing now. What do I need a gaming set for? But
Yeah.
you're two encounters away from maybe you're having to deal with an adversary that is like, okay, sit down. Like James Bond having to play a card game with a villain.
Yeah.
And if he didn't know how to play that game or didn't have that kit of whatever it would help him to solve the problem, yeah, I mean, then he's screwed. So yeah, these things can be totally useful. And I'm gonna have to go and get Xanathars and open it up and see about what they recommend.
Yeah. They give you a lot of really creative ways to use them, and they can be very, very useful. As we went through the list there, I think some things are key. You really have to have it, like, tinderbox, torch, backpack, bedroll. If you can afford a healer's kit or potion of healing, maybe a bag of caltrops, I probably would throw into almost every backpack, with every character. Chalk, I would always get. Mirror, many times I would probably get that one. So there's some things I would say are so useful I would choose them for every character, and then other things that would depend on the adventure or what kind of character I've created.
I actually just noticed this table. I don't remember this one about the container
Mhm.
capacity,
Right.
where you actually are given an idea of, well, how much can you put into a backpack, and apparently a barrel and a bucket as well, which we probably would never have. But I think
Right.
that's actually kind of useful. I would never have guessed that a sack could carry the same amount as a backpack. Like that to me is a bit strange, but I guess I don't really picture. I picture sacks being smaller.
Yeah, yeah, they're definitely talking about a larger sack, although 1 cubic foot is not that big. But I guess the real key there is the backpack is not that big, right? We're talking about
Yeah.
medieval size backpack. We're not talking. We have a store in Canada, Mountain Co-op. I think in the States, the similar one is called, what is it called again? It starts with an R.
Oh, I have
Anyway,
no
these
idea.
these are like modern outdoor stores have these my backpack is this massive massive thing.
Exactly.
They this is, D&D is usually in a medieval type environment, and they didn't have backpacks like we have now. So this is a pretty basic backpack.
And I like that they actually mention because that's something I've always just assumed that the bedroll or the rope would be strapped to the outside of the backpack. Where
Right.
um, I'm glad they actually have that in there.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
gotta
so
say, the
that's
information they have in the book is so useful to giving you ideas because I think a lot of players probably just run on the assumption of, oh, I'm going to have light or I'm going to have this or going to be able to open locks. But the game is actually saying, well, yeah, you could. And here is sort of a decent sort of outline of what you can do with these things and what kind of things you might need. And I think that just kind of it makes me feel happy and warm somehow.
well, a lot of these basic, mundane items, regular equipment, adventure gear, it actually can add a lot to the game. And it seems quite simple, but in the game, it can be quite useful. And yeah,
Because
it's a part of the game, I
I think
think, that people don't pay attention as much now because the magic items are the fancy. And there's so many magic items, right? Because third-party companies have
yeah.
books full of them, and you can look online, and I think sometimes the basic gear is forgotten.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm going to take that fancy sword that I just picked up out of that chest after defeating that whatever, and it's going to be great. And I'm going to put it on my. Sorry, did you have a belt with an actual. No, you didn't? Oh, it's too bad. You're going to have to hold on to it. So, therefore,
Yeah.
you're a disadvantage for opening doors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think next time we can look at more again starting out. So we've done some on the backgrounds of characters, but I think we can do a little bit more about matching a background to your character,
Yeah.
and about, how do you start out? What do you put on your maybe we can put up a player character sheet, and we can make sure that people know what goes where, and we can
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about just beginning the game with your newly created character.
Yeah, because even I get lost about where to put things on a sheet. It eventually, and I swear this happens every single time. You turn it over and you just start writing on the back, even though you have all these spots where you can
Yeah.
write it nicely and organized. But it's like then you turn it over and you're like ah, and then 2 sessions later you're like, wait a minute, I have a thing. It's on the back of the sheet. That's totally the thing that'll solve the problem. And by then you've already solved it a different way. So being organized is important.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think it's every probably 3 or 4 levels or so you redo your sheet because it gets things are
Oh,
all over the
yeah.
place. Yeah.
And technology has tried to solve that problem so many times, and you've heard this rant from me a couple of times now. I went through the pain of going, oh, there must be a better way to do this using software and all these sorts of
Mhm.
things. And eventually, after I think a year, I bounced through a couple different things, and
Yeah.
then I returned to, wait a minute, this game is about paper and pencils.
Yeah.
What the hell am I doing? So yeah, but the drawback, as you pointed out, is that eventually erasing enough things, you kind of gotta,
Yeah.
replenish the page.
Yeah. But I'm definitely on the side of a lot of times simple is better.
Exactly. I mean, I've seen players that have like spreadsheets, just like these really simple, compact sort of character stat, stuff, and then the next page is like, what they have, but I never quite understand it, so maybe that's an episode later on. How do you
Yeah.
do some more advanced character organization or management or whatever?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so we've talked a lot about the basic equipment that you can have in the game and all those kinds of things, and I hope you guys have learned something. I know that I have, because having a thing and an object is just only part of it. How do you actually use that object in creative ways? That is the harder part of all this, of gaming in general. When you're, got your brain going and you got to figure out how to get over that wall or defeat that villain. But of course, we'll be back next week. All of the social stuff is down below there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always email us or talk to us on Twitter. I'm assuming Twitter's still around at this time you're listening to this. So,
Better than ever.
so we'll see you all next time. And as always, Andrew, thank you. You are amazing.
Thanks, Shane. Later.